What's up? Welcome back to the Barton and Bud show. Thank you for joining us once again. Been a fun start here. The last few episodes. Please 5-star review us, rate us, all that stuff on the Apple charts. That helps us a ton. As if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the backgrounds are still a work in progress. I'm sitting here. Quarantine is limiting my production value, but we're getting there, man. One step at a time. And Bud, this week we got some transfer rankings to talk about. Anything else on your mind here going on, or we just going to dive right in?
Well, we got to wrap up 2020, dude, with Zack Evans. Maybe we can just give a minute or two on this. The guy that the 5-star or former 5-star running back, Zack Evans, had one of the most interesting recruitments really in the whole country, man. Zack Evans, who's actually been maybe taking some yoga classes up by you in Nashville, or are you a yogi?
I dabble here and there. Not a regular yogi. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get there. I think it'll help my back, but I wish I'd started when I was Zach's age, because I think he's on the right track. This guy knows what he's doing. You're right. He's been a little bit of a part-time Nashville local of late, which makes sense because it's just kind of random. Like, the guy is just kind of a random guy. For those that aren't familiar, he's the 5-star running back according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. He is a freak show athlete. He is an elite talent, and his recruitment has been just bonkers. And no one's been talking about him because we're sort of waiting for him to just land somewhere. He's a 2020 guy. The rest of that class is in the books, and Zack Evans, I don't know if you want to run through the chronology. Maybe I can. Who wants to take this?
If you want to kind of go, Chris Hummer had a pretty good.
Yeah, he had a great story on it.
I'll pull that up here so we don't miss. But Zack Evans, he titled it "Zack Evans' all-time crazy recruitment is over finally." So basically, between December 21, 2019, and January 7th of 2020, Evans was sent home the night of the 6A state championship game after he reportedly refused to give up his cell phone, breaking team policy. It was his second suspension of the season. Look, that's a pretty big deal to not play in the 6A state title game in the state of Texas. His team still won pretty easily, I believe. Evans announced he had signed during the early signing period, but did not reveal the team. We all kind of learned that it was Georgia, and then Georgia let him out of his letter of intent, basically just didn't turn it in, right? And said, no,
and Georgia was an off-the-wall pick to begin with, too. He wasn't even really publicly considering Georgia, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, he's signed with Georgia, of all places. So that, I think, in and of itself was kind of crazy.
So he also – in between there, he kind of issued that weird apology on live TV where the people doing the interview really, and it's awkward anyway to have a high school kid doing an apology on live TV when almost nobody in the audience knows what he's apologizing for, or most people don't. But they really didn't ask any follow-up questions either, so it was kind of just, very very obtuse. And then he ends up going to TCU. And if I had given you 5 guesses on Thanksgiving about where Zack Evans was going to end up, would TCU have been any of your 5?
No, it wouldn't have been. Now, I will say, if you'd given me 5 guesses in April where he had landed, I didn't even know TCU was in the mix, but I might have just guessed them. Because the thing about Zack Evans is every time you talk to someone in the know about his recruitment, there was always some random new team that was now the one he was favoring or was the one he wanted to visit. And so it was totally unpredictable the way this recruitment would go. But after signing day, Texas A&M would have made a lot of sense for Zack Evans for a lot of reasons. But at some point they filled up. I can't remember if it was before or after signing day they filled up. But ultimately they didn't have a spot for him. Some of the other programs, Georgia had sort of moved on after the issues they had behind the scenes. LSU had basically moved on after he was perceived to be a favorite to land at LSU late in the process. Texas, I don't know how much Texas pursued or if they had a scholarship available, but that never was really seeming to connect. And so there at some point it was just sort of like, well, where can he land? Who even has a spot for him? Who's held out available to take him, and it always made sense that he lands somewhere back in the state of Texas. So I didn't have a beat on this. I didn't know TCU was sort of positioning to land him, but in retrospect, like, it does make sense. He's going back to Texas. It's a program that has taken some chances on guys in the past, and it's panned out. And this is a kid that, as flaky as he is, that's really ultimately what it is. It's sort of a flakiness to him. I don't think anyone necessarily thinks he is a bad kid. He's not a very focused kid, and he is someone that the knock, if anything, has just been sort of this: how much does he love football? So if Gary Patterson and that crowd can get him focused, motivated, keep him on track, he is the most talented running back in this class, and one of the more talented running backs we'll see in any class. And so it's going to be fascinating to see what the outcome here is.
If running back still mattered in the NFL as far as the draft, like if this was 10 years ago, he's a no doubt 5-star for us. I think even with the behavioral stuff and sort of I don't want to say behavioral stuff because I don't want to imply he's a bad kid, but just if he had his head screwed on a little straight, a little more focus consistently, I think he probably still could have been a 5-star for us. But with those combinations of things, right, we really want to project our 5 stars to be first-round picks. And, I mean, Edwards-Helaire was barely a first-rounder this year. We've had some recent years with no backs. We've seen the trends. That combined with him maybe not always loving football that much leads him to be our 33rd rated player in the top 24/7. So basically the first guy out for us. Like, despite all that, we still love this kid's game. I mean, I think his stop-start relative to his size, I mean, he's probably, 210? He's a thick dude. He can run through arm tackles. He can catch the ball some. When he plays hard, man. Like if TCU gets him on the field consistently, I don't think there's another back on that roster who starts over him unless he just can't pass protect at all or something like that. Because natural ability-wise, I mean, he's the guy in that 2020 class running back.
Yeah, I mean, and the production is there. You know, he averaged, I think, over 12 yards a carry or something, pretty absurd. Played at a high level, big games. But look, he's been suspended a few times. He's been, he's missed one semifinals. I think he missed like the first half for taking his ACTs or just a lot of just weird stuff like that. That look, we just kind of got to see how it plays out. But certainly a big get for TCU, and probably in a lot of ways, it's sort of like, what do they have to lose? Like, why not take him? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if it does, this is the type of talent that doesn't often commit to TCU. And they lose Darius Anderson and Shewo Lanalua, 2 really good backs in this class. So the opportunity is certainly there. So I'm kind of excited. Frankly, I'm kind of excited that's where he landed, because it could work out. I think there's a lot of places he could have landed where it didn't really make a lot of sense. This one does, in terms of the opportunity there, the coaching staff there, and the talent. So let's see if he gets out on the field next fall.
Absolutely. So the other big thing we had this week, as you mentioned, was our transfer rating. So this is something we've been working on for several months here. 24/7 Sports has the transfer portal where you can go in and see how everybody's rated. As of right now, we have 166 guys with ratings. I imagine, given all the requests that team sites hit me up with yesterday, that we'll probably be to 200, I don't know, within a month or so. It's just kind of a neat thing. We wanted to be sure to keep our grades on the same scale that we use to grade recruits, right? So, and with that, we didn't give out a whole lot of 4 and 5 stars. We had, I think, out of the 166 guys, 15 4 stars, no 5 stars. And I don't want to spend all day on process here, but the reason why we didn't is because, like, our research shows that quarterback's a little bit different on this, right? Quarterbacks do seem to transfer and succeed, but you know how many transfer players have gone first round other than quarterbacks the last 3 years?
No, do you have that number?
0.
Oh, what did you say? First 3 rounds?
No, first round.
First round. Gotcha. Yeah.
So like we had some guys go second and third round last year with Van Jefferson and Jonathan Grenard, second and third respectively. But last 3 years, nobody other than quarterbacks who have transferred have gone in the first round. And I think that's really because if you are a position player, you don't have to deal with sort of like the incumbent, like overcoming the incumbent bias, right? Where like, oh, this kid's our returning leader at quarterback. And I'm not trying to dismiss that. I think there's probably something to having a guy who you've gone to battle with before. But at the other positions, I think they generally just play the best player. So if you're transferring out, especially if you're going Power 5 to Power 5, or especially if you're transferring down a level, you're usually transferring out because you got beat out, or because you had some sort of academic issue or drug testing issue or behavioral issue. The guys who are like no doubt first round types, they typically start and usually start early in their careers. Not always, but they're by the second or third year, they're usually starters. They're not guys transferring. So just my research shows, and I know that we've seen this, for the most part, these position rating guys or these position player, other than quarterbacks, they're kind of more filling holes, and they're not usually turning into superstars. Quarterback, though, is different.
Yeah, and I think a pretty telling representation of that is, just if you look at our rankings, some of the guys that ended up ranked the highest, like to your point, Bud, I think if you're transferring up, if you're transferring from FCS up, from Group of 5 to Power 5, then that is telling as to your ability. You're saying I've graduated from this level. Let me challenge myself somewhere else. Like a Rock Ya-Sin comes to mind, who transferred from where he was at Delaware, I guess, to Temple, and was he a first, second rounder last year? And even this year, there is a couple of our highest rated non-quarterbacks are transferring up. So you have Quincy Roche, who's transferring up from Temple to Miami, a guy who was the AAC Defensive Player of the Year, one of the top pass rushers in the country, according to PFF. Just a guy that's going to be that's viewed as an NFL prospect playing in the AAC. Well, he'll be in the ACC next year. And then the other one of note is the Jabril Cox kid, who comes from North Dakota State, who was a linebacker, one of the top players in all of FCS over the last 2 years. He's going to be at LSU and expected to be a first-year starter there. And look, if you're starting on the defense at LSU, history tells us you're going to get drafted. And so I think those are two that represent sort of the guys you should be more likely to be excited about, rather than the guy that's transferring from one Power 5 to another Power 5.
Absolutely. I think there's some clear winners here, and I want to talk teams and I want to talk players. For me, like the two obvious winners are Miami, because you end up getting, as you mentioned, Quincy Roche. You end up getting De'Aaron King, and quarterback there is so important for the Hurricanes, because they've just had poor QB play, but also like poor QB leadership over the last couple of years. I mean, like, you can't have your quarterbacks also being like some of your anti-leaders on your team. And the Miami guys will tell you that's sort of what they've had at times in recent years. And I don't know that De'Aaron King's like the most amazing leader in the world, but I don't think we got any kind of negative feedback about that at Houston, other than the fact that he sat out and basically did the whole, like, I'm going to take a redshirt year in order to maybe preserve my eligibility. And then Miami also goes and gets Isaiah Walker, who is one of our highest rated offensive tackles in the class of 2020. He enrolled at Florida during the whole quarantine thing. He decided to transfer. He was only on campus at Florida for like 2 months. So Miami really, what do they have? 3 of our top 9 transfers this year. Miami has shown a real willingness to go out and try to fix their roster with transfers. Hasn't always worked, but they've also had some guys who have worked out.
Yeah, I mean, last year they were considered the big winners too. I mean, they had, and look, Bubba Bolden didn't make a big impact last year. He was injured for most of the season, but that was hailed as a big get. They also got Jalen Phillips, who didn't play last year but will play this year, who's the former #1 player in the country. They also got, obviously, Tate Martell was a big name that hasn't hit, and so we'll consider that a miss. But still, at the time, like that was sort of a hyped pickup. And then probably the most impactful pickup they've gotten so far from the transfer market was also last year. They got KJ Osborne from Buffalo in the MAC, and he got drafted, did he not?
Yeah, I believe he did.
So that's I mean, talk about not only being aggressive but being successful in it. Like if Jalen Phillips and Bubba Bolden have good seasons this year, if Quincy Roche and Derek King have good seasons this year, and then if Isaiah Walker turns into a good player, that's 5 like really big time transfers in 2 years. I guess 6 if you're going to throw in KJ Osborne too from last year's team. But I mean that's a heavy lift. I mean that's getting after it in the transfer market. I'm not sure what Miami's selling to get all these guys to come to Coral Gables, but man, I mean that's impressive.
Playing time in warm weather, man.
That's right.
Got to be it.
It ain't bad.
Staying in the Sunshine State, I also think Florida did a really good job. And I kind of got the full Barton Simmons experience yesterday on the Florida board where the rankings come out. And then I got to be you on this since I kind of managed these. And I was told that I was pretty dumb. And given that Dan Mullen has such experience developing these transfers, sample set kind of minimum, but we're going to ignore that if we're a Gators fan. I thought that we were pretty kind in our ratings to Florida. Florida has 3 of the top 31 or 30 guys here. They have Brenton Cox, who we put a 91 grade on. I think similar grade to what we gave Jonathan Grenard last year, who ended up being a 3rd round pick. And then also guys like Lorenzo Lingard and Justin Shorter, 2 dudes who they were basically rated super highly out of high school due to some really nice athletic ability. And they weren't able to make any kind of impact or see the field in Lingard's case due to injury in their first 2 years at Penn State and Miami, respectively. But we still put 88s on them, which basically has them both as top 30 transfers for us. So that gives Florida 3 of the top 30. But I think that also speaks to, yes, we have to downgrade these guys if they don't do anything in their first 2 years at all. Otherwise, it doesn't. I don't think we're staying true to our rankings and true to what the data on transfers tells us. Now, Dan Mullen does have a great track record of developing transfers based on like a 2-year sample set at Florida. We got to give him that. But still, I think these are a really nice haul for Florida. Even if one of the 2 hits plus Cox, they're going to be really happy.
Yeah, I'll come to your defense here, bud. I mean, look, I think. First of all, they're high 3-star guys, so we still think they're good players. Like that's always the disclaimer you have to throw out there. 3-star is not a bum. 3-star is a good player, and so I think the difference between where they're ranked in high school versus where they're ranked now is probably the thing that's hard to grasp, because Justin Shorter in particular, he was a 5-star guy for us. He was our number 1 receiver. He was a big, athletic target who, when we saw in person, was outstanding. But Justin Shorter, he dealt with some issues at Penn State, so I'll excuse him there to a degree, because he just wasn't able to get going as quickly as he would like. And I think he got behind the 8 ball at that point, like started pressing, maybe started feeling like he was underachieving, and that I think got in his head a little bit. But when he was on the field, we didn't, like, the confidence wasn't there. The ball skills weren't there. The ball tracking wasn't there. And so, hey, in his defense, or in the defense of the Florida fans that didn't think he was ranked high enough, maybe a change of scenery is exactly what he needs. Fresh start, new clock starts, and let's just see what he can do. I think more likely what he's shown to us at this point is just that he's a good player. A really physically talented kid, and he's got a chance to catch a lot of passes at Florida. But unless you're improving your ball tracking skills and your consistency at receiver, like, that's not. It's just, he is what he is. He is what we've seen in college, and so he's going to be a really interesting one to watch. I'd love for him to to figure it all out and make our 5-star ranking out of high school look right. But I think at this point, like that's what you were talking about earlier, is we shouldn't get overly excited about big name transfers who are leaving one school because they didn't live up to the big name potential. Let's let them earn that at a new spot. And so, that's ultimately kind of the guys to value in this setting. Like in terms of non-quarterback guys that we did rank high that we think have a chance to make an impact. I mean, Brenton Cox certainly is one. Khalil Herbert was an interesting one. Only played one game, I want to say, last year for Kansas, became really highly regarded. We got really good feedback on him. He's a running back that's transferred to Virginia Tech. And that's the type of guy that, look, if it hits, that could be a really nice get for Virginia Tech, because we're going to hit the mailbag a little bit later. But, Justin Fuente doesn't bring in like the sexiest recruiting classes, but they're resourceful in the way they find guys. And Khalil Herbert seems to be a really good find.
Indeed. In fact, I think he was our top rated running back, just barely. There was a lot of running backs we had in that sort of 88 to 90 range. I think there's a couple quarterbacks to get excited about as well here. I mean, JT Daniels, this was sort of a tough eval for Barton and I, right? So came as the number 3 quarterback in the class of 2018, right, which was the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields class, because he reclassified into that class. He almost certainly would have been the number 1 QB if he had stayed in the class of 2019, but instead he moved up a year. He plays and has sort of a so-so true freshman year at USC, a year that was pretty tumultuous for the Trojans. Then last year, was it the first game that he hurt himself in?
Yeah.
So they were pumped up about it, right? In that new, not Cliff Kingsbury, but Graham Harrell offense there at USC. He gets Wally pipped a little bit with Keaton Slovis taking over for him after he tears his ACL, and then he jumps into portal. But he's going to have he has 3 to play 3, right? If he gets eligible. I mean, the guy's going to have he's a good candidate to have 3 years of eligibility remaining. And that certainly factors in to our ratings process a little bit. Like, what was your initial high school rating? What have you shown so far? What's the feedback that we got on you from various places, like the destination school and the school you're coming from? Obviously, Daniels has not picked a school yet, so the feedback was, more just USC side and what we heard from around the industry. But also, how much time do you have left to realize your potential? If you're a grad transfer, we're not looking at what your high school rating was all that much. It's primarily like, what have you done so far? If you have 3 more years of eligibility left, we're going to lean a little bit more on what your high school rating was. So there's certainly a balancing act we have to do there. But I'm excited about JT. And then your guy just underneath him, KJ Costello.
Yeah. And on JT, like here's something I think is like, I'm very interested in how this plays out, because I would say we've been like you mentioned, yes, he had a tough year as a freshman because the team around him was awful. The offensive line was terrible. The run game was non-existent. He got absolutely beat to death that first year. But he had moments where he flashed this really special talent, and where you just sort of go, wow. And so he did lose his job to Keaton Slovis. No shame in that. Keaton Slovis is really good. It's coming off an injury. So I think it's really important for JT Daniels' next stop, whether it's staying at USC, whether it's going somewhere else, to pick a good fit for him. Because I go back to Kyler Murray. And when you remember Kyler Murray transferring from Texas A&M, I would say to that point in our exposure to Kyler Murray as a college football player, again, he's 5'10". He is an outlier in terms of size. He was an unbelievable, legendary high school football player with production that was incredible. But when he played at Texas A&M, he was just sort of this playground quarterback. He was almost a gimmicky kind of guy. They'd throw him in there. They'd run some stuff with him. He was a scrambler. Never played within the structure of the offense really. And look, that's not a knock on him. He was young, but it was just like what we were exposed to. And so at that point, like there's really no way for us to predict Kyler Murray was going to be a future Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 draft pick when he goes to Oklahoma. But he does go to Oklahoma. He waits his turn. It's a great fit for him offensively, and that talent shines through, and here we are. And he's, playing in the NFL. JT Daniels could go that way. Maybe he goes the Tate Martell way, where it's like hype kid cut out of high school, maybe was always overhyped. Let's see what happens at his next stop. I'm genuinely very curious into sort of which direction it goes, and so that's going to be a fun one to follow and track. In terms of Costello, remember like 2019 he was banged up and that Stanford offensive line was a turnstile, and like Davis Mills and him both got banged up a bunch that season. 2018 though, he had a top 25 like passer rating, I think he was top 25 in the country in terms of production at the quarterback position, total offense, something like that. He was the best quarterback probably in the Pac-12. I guess that was Gardner Minshew's year, so maybe I wouldn't go that far, but some numbers would have borne out that he was the best quarterback in the Pac-12. So he goes to a great fit with Mike Leach, and yet he's got to go there with a new receiving core that is just learning the air raid system. That's not really that great of a receiving core, and he's not having spring practice to get with them. He's not even having summer 7-on-7s to get with them. So it's a tricky spot. But I think why KJ Costello to me is a very important transfer is because Mississippi State doesn't have anyone else on that roster that's really capable of running the air raid unless you're going to go with like a true freshman. The Garrett Schrader kid is like a fun quarterback, but he's a scrambler. He's a athlete. He is a wind up and throw guy. He's not a natural thrower. Keaton Thompson, another one of maybe my favorite transfer of the entire cycle, is sort of the same way, just not a fit for an air raid. So it was critical to even have a chance to get a guy like KJ Costello. So I thought that was a huge gift for Mississippi State. And yet I don't know what to predict in terms of how successful it will be. But Keaton Thompson, I think you and I both agree, is like going to be a dude at Virginia.
Oh, there's no doubt. I think that the fit of Keaton there it's just perfect. I mean, like, could you go out and find another player who was as similar to the guy who you just lost? I mean, they're pretty similar. Now, I don't know if Thompson quite has the same like break tackle ability, like just the power and I
don't know. He's a big dude now.
He is. The guy at UVA was so hard to sack, man.
Yeah.
Even against the better defenses they played, even when they played Clemson or when they played Florida, like UVA's offensive line was not that great, and the defensive line would get through pretty quickly, and then he would just pull some Houdini stuff, and then sometimes it was just like, get off me, and then all of a sudden he'd scramble and find some guy open, and sometimes he'd even throw it to him accurately, which was a plus. And this is a great fit, I think, for Keaton. So good fit into Mississippi State with Costello, good fit out. We're coming up here on about half an hour. There's a couple more things I want to get to, and then just want to tease this for y'all. On Friday, we're going to be back with a special listener mailbag episode. So I want to talk real quickly. We already mentioned Khalil Herbert. Is there anybody else that you want to discuss as far as offensive guys, non-quarterback edition?
I wrote about Kenny Yeboah, who is another Temple transfer. Man, Temple, you have to take your hat off to Matt Rule, and you have to be willing to learn from Matt Rule's approach, because I'm right now currently I'm studying which programs have been developing and producing the best by position in the NFL, like as it relates to the NFL draft over the last 5 years. So like recent history. And Temple keeps on popping up. And all these guys, most of these guys, a lot of them were recruited under Matt Rule. Kenny Yeboah is the latest guy that Matt Rule dug up, who was like a receiver that they recruited to play tight end. And he's not been overly productive at Temple, so you're not going to be in awe of his stats, but he's gotten really good reviews early on from Ole Miss folks, and coming into an offense that really hasn't utilized the tight end in a few years, he's got a chance. I mean, keep in mind, Lane Kiffin just got done producing Harrison Bryant, who's an NFL tight end at FAU. They're going to probably utilize and lean on a tight end more. I think Kenny Yeboah is a guy that you could see have a little bit of a breakout season at Ole Miss. So he's one that I'm excited about. And then offensively too, I would probably like a guy that I've always sort of been impressed with back to high school is Coy Cronk at Indiana, who transferred to Iowa, who I think is going to have a chance to start there. And then if Cade Mays is eligible, Cade Mays is probably one of the best returning offensive linemen in the SEC, going from Georgia to Tennessee, SEC East transfer. That could really solidify Tennessee's offensive line as they've started to build it from, hey, let's like try to get this program moving in the right direction. Like, let's see if we can recruit some line of scrimmage athletes. Now, all of a sudden, in year 3 under Jeremy Pruitt, if Cade Mays is playing along with Trey Smith, Darnell Wright, Wanye Morris, and Brandon Kennedy, I think is that who their starting center is. Anyways, that turns into a really like a one of the better units in the SEC potentially if those freshmen have continued to evolve.
So I'm going to hit you with this. We kind of save this for last. We know we have a lot of diehards listen to the show. We also know we have a little more casual guys who want to hear more player breakdown. But transfers are not slowing down, right? We're having more and more transfers every year, it seems, thanks to the transfer portal. Beginning in 2021, we think we will have transfer, like immediate eligibility transfer, because that vote's probably going to pass in May. And even though it won't go into effect for the 2020 season, for the 21 season, it likely will. What do we do with transfers as a recruiting industry? Because obviously we rated them, but we're not like incorporating transfers right now in our recruiting ranking. So like, Miami's recruiting class for 2020 does not shoot up thanks to them getting, Isaiah Walker and De'Aaron King and those dudes. Do you think there will come a time when we do decide to incorporate that in there, or do you want to have like a separate recruiting, like transfer team ratings thing? Do you ever think we're going to hit a breaking point there as a like recruiting industry to where we need to sort of put team grades on these things?
No, I think we're getting there. Yeah, I think it's maybe we do 2 separate rankings, a team ranking of your recruiting class and a team ranking including your transfer class. But look, the reality is transfers are becoming a central piece of recruiting strategy in every department in America. Now, maybe not in Clemson, who doesn't go out and get transfers, but 129 other teams, pretty much. It's huge, and there is starting to be within recruiting departments guys that are really devoted. Their job is devoted to monitoring the transfer market, to recruiting the transfer market, and so because of the more liberal opportunities for guys to be immediately eligible, the impending legislation that seems like it's trending towards guys being immediately eligible, like it's just going to be a much more central piece of the equation. So yeah, like it would be silly of us not to treat it as like that. And I think it's heading in that direction for sure.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and the fans certainly want it, but we have to do it in the right way. And you also have a timing issue, right? Like these guys who are quote unquote transferring to new schools right now, they can still flip really at any time until they enroll. They don't actually sign anything.
This happened to Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew committed to he committed to Alabama. He was going to be the backup at Alabama and just be a coach for the rest of his career. Like he was basically signing up and saying, "Look, I know I'm not going to start. I'm going to start my coaching career now," and then he flipped to Washington State.
100%. I think if we do integrate it, what we would have to do is okay, on National Signing Day, here are your high school recruiting rankings. And then, on August 1, all right, guys, well, this is kind of anticlimactic, but now we have a good feel for where everybody is enrolled at. Maybe we have our combined high school and transfer ratings. I'm not promising that this year. That's probably something that if we were to do it, maybe we do it for 21. But I think it's an interesting conversation to have because we do get a lot of fans tweeting us and saying, hey, like, how come you don't include all these transfers in our team rating score for recruiting? Like, we saved those scholarships, and they have a point to a point, but it's certainly not the full picture if you include them either, because you have to make sure that your transfer ratings are good as well. All right, hey guys, really appreciate you listening to the Barton and Bud Show. What we're going to do now is cut this one short, and we're going to go ahead and ask you all to give us 5-star ratings and reviews. And then on Friday, we're going to come back and hit you with our listener appreciation mailbag episode, because y'all got us over those 247 5-star ratings and reviews.